everyone! Today we'll be talking about some vocabulary that you may encounter when you study ecosystems. The very first term we need to talk about is what is ecosystem. And the ecosystem is the complex community of organisms and its environment functioning as an ecological unit. Now, what does that mean? That means that there is an organic component to your ecosystem, and that would be the plants, the animals, the fungi, the bacteria. And then there are inorganic materials that are also part of your ecosystem, such as water, rocks, and even the energy from the sun. Now, ecosystems can be roughly divided into aquatic and terrestrial, and after that, it can be subdivided even further. But this is all you need to know about this for now. Now, there are different models of ecosystems, and we will be talking about every single one of those in this lesson. So the very first one I want to talk about is the energy pyramid. And the energy pyramid is the graphic representation of the ecosystem that helps you analyze the energy flow through the ecosystem. Now, the food web and the food chain is something that you might be a little more familiar. The food chain is a sequence of who eats who in an ecosystem, but it's a very linear system. So you can see that, for example, over here you have some insects that being eaten by other insects, and in turn this is eaten by frog and that is eaten by snake. It's a very linear system. When you put all of the food chain in one ecosystem together, you will get a food web. And a food web is a graphical representation of what eats what with all the food chains combined in the same ecosystem. Before we talk about the pyramid, we need to talk about something called a trophic level. Now, a trophic level is a group of organisms that occupy the same level on the food chain. So, for example, right, you have herbivores, right, and they eat plants. So the things that they eat are on the same trophic level. So, for example, if you have a deer that eats grass and it also eats leaves from the tree, the leaves and the grass are on the same trophic level. Another term that we need to talk about is autotrophs or producers. And an autotroph is an organism that creates its own food from inorganic substances using light or chemical energy. Now, what do I mean by that? Consider plants. Plants grow in the soil. What they do, they take minerals and chemicals from the soil, which are inorganic materials, and they use light, the energy from the sun, to build themselves and to build food for themselves. This is why we call them producers, because they turn inorganic matter into organic matter using energy from the sun. And plants are not the only organisms that do that. Algae do that. A lot of microorganisms do that. And some of those microorganisms don't even use the energy from the sun. In the ocean, there are hydrothermal vents where you can find bacteria that actually uses heat and has a completely different way of synthesizing its own energy. Now, we've talked about autotrophs, but when we talk about animals, just about every animal is a heterotroph. And heterotrophs are consumers. Heterotrophs cannot eat inorganic matter, okay? So they cannot take nutrients from the soil and build their bodies with that. They cannot turn that into sugar. They must eat organic substances. And what are organic substances? Well, plants are organic substances, other animals are organic substances. So you get the idea, something that was alive before, right? Or something that came from something living. But in general, we also talk about, organic chemistry and so on. But This is heterotrophs cannot create their own food. So they have to go and eat someone else, which is why we call them consumers. So when you have things like primary consumers, right, you have someone who maybe herbivores, right? They cannot create grass, right? They cannot take nutrients from the soil, but they eat grass. And then you have predators that prey on, say, rabbits that eat the grass, and they obviously consume the other consumers. So they consume the primary consumers, and we call them secondary consumers, and so on. And finally, we have decomposers. Those are the organisms that break down dead organic material into inorganic substances. So in the end, the whole cycle comes full circle, right? You have plants that gonna take inorganic substances and turn them into organic matter. Then you have a whole chain of consumers that consume each other, which means they're consuming organic matter. But eventually, all of that organic matter is going to be decomposed by decomposers that eat dead plants and animals back into inorganic substances so that the plants can start again. So the examples of decomposers are fungi and bacteria.